a little bit later on, a new Assyrian king, he really goes whole hog, Sennacherib, and he comes down and takes over the whole land. But what's that little spot in the middle? Somehow he is able to control all this, but not that one little spot. Here again in Kings. He's going to march, Sennacherib, he's going to march against Jerusalem. But Yahweh says, no, this is what I have to say about that. He will not enter this city. He will not shoot an arrow at it. He will not come up against it with a shield. But by the road which he came, he'll go back on that same road. I will protect this city. And then that same night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. And in the early morning, when it was time to get up, there they lay, so many corpses. So he said, yeah, I guess we'll go home now. And you got that. He couldn't take Jerusalem. So he goes home. What's interesting is now when they find over here, they find Sennacherib's palace, and they find his archives, then they immediately, whenever they find old documents, they start translating them, and they read a very interesting thing, his account of this.
This will be good.
A little honesty for a change. Perspective different, but he says, as for Hezekiah the Jew, I besieged 46 of his fortified walled cities and surrounding smaller towns without number. But he himself I shut up within Jerusalem, his royal city, like a bird in a cage. Which is all he could say, because he didn't take it.
Yep.
Now, why is this important? Because we're talking about, when we read the Bible, we're talking about real things that happened in real places that we can really see. And anytime you read somebody's own history, and it sounds a little fantastic, you could doubt it. But then, how are you going to find some documents 3,000 years old that say one version of the story and go all these hundreds and hundreds of miles away somewhere else in a totally different kingdom in a different language and have them tell basically the same story? And they're enemies.
Right.
People that like to criticize the Bible and say, oh, it's just all stories, I'm sorry. Stuff like this undermines that. So you can see that Jerusalem is in the middle of the countries. Babylonia, finally, we get to a bigger version of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar.
So this is after Assyria's taken over
Long time
Babylon.
later, I'm skipping way ahead in time.
Okay.
So Nebuchadnezzar takes over Assyria, which is in heavy decline by then. And this is all the bigger it gets. I was for some reason thinking he just covered the whole earth, But that was it. That's all the bigger it gets. And this is interesting. God says to Nebuchadnezzar in a dream, and then Daniel interprets it, "You, O king, are the king of kings, and the true God of heaven has granted you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. Wherever human beings, animals, and birds of the sky live, he has given them to you and to your power. And you are the head of gold." I don't want to go into the whole dream, but that's the statue. You're the head of gold. This is your kingdom. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to you, not necessarily smaller, but inferior in some way. Then a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule all the earth. Then there will be a fourth kingdom, one as strong as iron. Just like iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and as iron can break in pieces all these other metals, so it will break in pieces and crush all the other nations. Then you are seeing feet of half clay and half iron, so this will be a division in that kingdom. Okay, I'll just skip down. So that's Babylon, the gold head. Then comes the silver chest, Persia. Quite a difference. The king of Persia, and I'm showing it at its not like the next day. This is as big as it got. By the time of the end of Persia, this is the extent to which it had gotten under Xerxes, and he's the one that, if you watch the movie The 300, he goes over here. This is his deal right here. The next thing...
You didn't want the desert, huh?
Nobody wants it. Isn't that funny? And I really think that's interesting because, and I don't need to show you more slides to point this out, nobody ever wants this. Not the next kingdom, not the next kingdom. Nobody ever wants it until one day Then one day he was shooting at some food.
Yeah. There you
Yeah,
go.
exactly.
All the kingdoms of the earth.
Pitch.
Nothing down there. Well. So who comes next? Alexander the Great.
It's the same.
Similar, very similar. And it's bigger over here because he takes over the Persian kingdoms over here. Now, Alexander is an important figure for us to know when we're reading the New Testament, because this is the time period between the Old and the New Testament. That's when he comes through, 330 about BC. Now, his thing wasn't to conquer territory. He did conquer territory, but his purpose wasn't to conquer territory. His purpose was to evangelize the world with Greek culture. He grew up, and his whole life, his tutor, his personal tutor, was Aristotle. And so he grows up, and he's really a philosopher. Yeah, he was a brilliant mind. He was an incredible whatever you call it, a guy that knows strategy. Yeah, and he was good at all that. But his purpose for employing those skills was to go all over the world and say, look how much better your life could be if only you thought the way we think. He's the one that says Western, or Greek rather, thinking is what you need. Greek thinking, that's the way, and you'll be elevated up out of your peasanthood, your poverty, whatever. Now, he says to himself, he says, there's 4 things that are important. And so he goes all around all these places, and he sets up little city after little city, city, and almost all of them are named Alexandria. They're everywhere. We think Alexandria, oh yeah, it's in Egypt. No, there's like 50 of them, and they're all over. Alexandria, they're everywhere. And in every city, there's 4 things. A gymnasium, a theater, an arena, and a temple. So he says these are the 4 areas of life that'll change everything for you. We believe the mind, that's king. So school, the gymnasium. Sports, the arena. The body, got to have the sound body. Mind, body. The theater, media. Get all you in there. We can tell you anything. The media, through plays and whatnot. And the temple, religion. And we know that religion, church was different for them. You go to church to have sex with the temple staff, and they represent the God that you're worshiping. That's how you have communion. A little different than the way we do it. There might be wine involved, but, you know. That's why when you read in different places about the temple prostitutes, it's like, what? How does that make sense? No, that makes sense. You're supporting the temple and participating in the worship. That's what you do. You go to church to have sex. So that's besides maybe bringing gifts or whatever, that was part of it. So the whole Greek mindset, besides the stuff we talked about earlier, the linear and the rational and the logical and abstract thinking versus concrete thinking, Alexander wanted to spread this way of life that elevates the human being, the mind, the body. Gymnos, gymnasium. Gymnos means naked. You go to school naked. The gymnasium. In our schools, the gymnasium is where you play sports, but the gymnasium was the school. So anyway, you got to understand that about Alexander. That was his whole thing. And Hellenism, when you talk about the Hellenists or Hellenism, Helena or Hellenica, that's Greece. So the Hellenism is Greekism, if you want to say it in bastardized English. All right. Spent more time on Alexander because that aspect is important. Then you go down to the Sea of Galilee. Let's jump ahead.